Okay, so good afternoon. I'm Willis, a blogger at Tech in Asia. So I just want to raise a hand, everyone knows, everyone on stage, right? No? Okay, so give me just 10 seconds introduction, short and sweet. From Rama.
Hi, I'm Rama. I'm from dailysocial.net, which is a tech blog that focuses on Indonesian tech industry. Thanks.
My name is Mohan. I run a company called E27 that focuses on Asia Pacific news on internet and startups. And we do the region's largest tech startup conference called Echelon.
Which just ended yesterday.
Just ended yesterday.
My name is Gwen. I co-founded and run SGE.io. We also focus on Southeast Asia internet trends and innovations.
Okay, so I'm just going to start straight. And if there's any question, just don't be shy. Raise out your hand and then just ask. Okay, we try to make it like a no bullshit panel. So first of all, the question, how innovative is startup founders in Asia in general, starting from random Mohan.
Okay, thanks. So if you look at the last few years, I think the startup culture was mainly driven by students or actually younger professionals, most of whom lacked the industry knowledge and the right business skills. So naturally, a lot of their ideas and a lot of their philosophies were based on what they were reading in the US. So it was just natural for them to make copycat related startups and technologies. But if you fast forward things to today, right, a lot of the startup founders are actually executives who've actually spent time within traditional industries. So for example, some of the companies at Echelon yesterday were within the finance industry as well as within the legal industry. So for them, they understand how the models in Asia work. They're fairly familiar with what is happening in the US and how the different models work as well. So they understand where they can innovate, how they can change their models and how they can adapt it for Asia. So in that sense, right, I would say that Asian startups have traditionally, are actually getting more and more innovative. And if you look at the likes of gaming and social networks, right, a lot of the stuff that American-based companies are pushing and getting done now have traditional roots in Asia. So everything from social gaming to in-app purchases to even Path having chat messages and stickers within their apps. So I would say Asian startups are a lot more disruptive than what most people actually think.
Can I add on to that? So in the past, you always say that China copies, right, from the West. But I think now there's increasingly a lot of Western companies copying from China, innovating from Asia companies and what they're doing. So I think that the reverse trend is quite interesting. But also something like, I think Tencent innovated like virtual goods and buying. And that's how, or the like button, I believe, was first introduced by, I think, Tencent in China. And it was a paid thing for businesses to have the like button. But then Facebook copied it and now it's everywhere. Something like that, I think. So that's something that was Asian innovation that happened that people don't really know about. So I think that's interesting to take note of. So we have stuff going on in Asia.
Rama.
I don't think I have the authority to talk about the whole region, but especially in Indonesia, a market that I'm familiar with, we're still at that stage where people just, startups are just trying to be creative with all the inspiration they get from Singapore, Malaysia, but mostly, of course, from Silicon Valley. And I think we're not there, in terms of the disruptive level, but we're trying to absorb a lot of knowledge from outside Indonesia and get it to be more creative, in a creative way, to market, for Indonesian.
I mean, so much about copycats copying the model from the West. So my question to the panel would be, is copying okay? Or is it okay to be opportunistic? You see something in the West that's working and you could actually bring it to Asia. So question is copying okay?
Well, I think we're all copying TechCrunch, Mashable, and the kind, so we're not able to actually trust.
Although we started around the same time around TechCrunch.
Oh, congratulations!
Yeah. No, but it was a hobby, so.
Well, I think it's okay to copy because at a certain point, especially in the smaller market, in the growing market, the first thing is you have to get, entrepreneurship to grow and innovation to grow, but not necessarily being disruptive. So I think in time it's growing to be more disruptive and innovative, but I don't think it has to start in the very beginning to be very, you still have to get some inspiration in some way.
Actually, so Patrick Grove, who runs a Kaja Group in Malaysia, right, had a very interesting statement, and that if you want to build $100 million companies in this region, you actually have to look at companies that are already residing in the US and see which ones you can copy and scale across Asia or Southeast Asia per se. So the few industries where you can do that are actually property, which, you know, where Property Guru, iProperty have actually done it. And iProperty is a publicly listed company in Australia. Property Guru is kind of on its way to IPO. If you look at travel, you know, the likes of your Zuji, which was actually started out of here, and I think was acquired by Webjet recently. If you look at, I think, so property is one thing, travel is another thing, and if you look at listings, so the likes of your car sites, you know, SG Carmarts that got acquired by SPH. So I think copying is fundamental to building really big companies over here. But the moral dilemma, or I would say the innovation dilemma that Asian companies always suffer is that should I make it like completely different from what is happening overseas, and then maybe get the likes of people like us who say, wow, you know, these guys are doing something truly different, or should I just copy it, make it $1 billion or $100 million company, and just go for it, you know, and just suffer that shame that people like us will put through them for copying. And I would say that it's the latter that makes more sense. Whichever makes a better business decision would be the one that wins. So the likes of iProperty, SG Carmarts, they're all copycats from the US, and they've all made it into the high leagues of businesses. So I think copying is actually fundamental to building companies over here.
I see it less as copying, as more like looking at what services that are fundamental to a city, to a country, and stuff like property. People always need, you know, to find somewhere to live, you know, something a hungry go where Yelp, it's to find something to eat. So I think that those are fundamental services, and listings, cars, everything. I think there was also a new Filipino-based property news site just launched a few months ago, or just late last year. So I think these are fundamental stuff that I wouldn't really call them copying, but more like looking at, again, a base infrastructural services that people need to live on, and then providing them with these platforms. So
I think most of the copycat business, so-called copycat business, I mean, if you really look into their model, they are not exactly a photocopied version of what's from the West. I mean, a lot of like localization has to be done, and you know, Asia, people, you know, Asia is so freaking fragmented, right? I mean, across 1.5 hours in Jakarta, we speak different language and stuff like that. So if you look at, you know, Asian companies and you really dive deep into their model, they are actually very, very different. So my question is that is business model and localization, is it a form of, are they a form of innovation?
For business model and, or rather monetizing a service from Asia-based consumers, I think a lot of platforms, when you look at it from the outside, it may seem similar, exactly what Willis said, but the back end, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done, and I want to bring that to kind of the problem of payment, logistics, and a lot of little infrastructural stuff that may be taken for granted in the US or Europe, but are very not developed in this part of the world. So when you think of, for innovation, I don't see it as innovation, but more like tackling the fitting together, drawing the bridges together that's needed to support such platforms. So there's a lot of hard work needed to be done by the entrepreneurs there to, you know, I guess work with banks, you know, work with various institutions. So will I consider that innovation? Maybe not exactly, but just work that needs to be done. You know, someone just needs to do that, and these people are doing it. So I commend them for that. And innovative or not, I think it works. So
I think that's a really good question. So I think that the strategy the Asian companies should really adopt is in business model innovation. So if you look at Line, right? Line makes more money every quarter than WhatsApp makes every year. And both of them are essentially the same services, you know, the chat messaging services, but their entire business model is completely different. WhatsApp is based on your pay-per-download model. Line is based on in-app purchases, stickers, and stuff that kind of make people want to interact and talk more. If you look at the social gaming industry, you know, the US was primarily based on a you know, large download or pay-per-fee model. Asia was primarily based on in-app purchases, freemium based model. The fundamental games, you know, the idea of them could have been slightly different, but the whole idea is how you collected money from people. And in this cases, Line, you know, and the social gaming industry have very clearly, you know, shown, right, that the business model can be very well changed in Asia, and you can make a ton more money here than in the US.
Yeah, I mean, like exactly, a very good example. Companies like Line and Kakao, they make a lot of money outside of Indonesia, but in Indonesia specifically, they have tons of users who are not willing to pay, which means they have to figure something out in terms of how they can monetize the market. And I think it needs a certain level of creativity and also looking at the local behavior, what kind of valuable items they would actually spend money for. But it's not really like innovation, like baseline innovation, but it's creativity on a certain level.
You also have to look at the entrepreneurs understanding the psychological behavior of the consumers in Asia, which can be quite different from those in the US. Was it in China that, again, Tencent, again on QQ, you have to pay to change your user ID, the color from red to green or green to red or something like that, that people paid for it to be a different color. I mean, it seems ridiculous to me, but people actually pay, I don't know how much, small amounts of money to just change the color of the name to something else. And why? I don't know, but these people figured out that users in their target market like that kind of identity building online. Yeah.
Okay, so you guys cover a lot of startups, and could you just name a couple of companies that you think are really disruptive and why?
I would like to talk a little bit about Vidsi. So Vidsi is a platform that showcases Southeast Asian short films. By in and itself, as a platform, is nothing super innovative. It's a website, that collects, again, allows people to publish short films. But it's interesting to me because they've identified a gap, which is that there's no big platform whereby young filmmakers and creatives on the ground have, like, online to showcase their work and be more visible. So I like that model in the sense that they found a niche in terms of the content space. And yeah, so I'm looking out for Vidsi, Viddse, I believe, yeah.
I like Wego, the company that won the Echelon event yesterday. They make like translation, especially for travel, really, really simple. I also like another company called Pop, which is a Taiwanese-based startup that makes like prototyping and mobile framework stuff like really, really easy. And then there's a local company that I think is doing some really interesting stuff called, is it Trade Hero? Yeah, Trade Hero, right? And I think they're another one that really looks at business model innovation in the way whereby they charge people to follow experts. So if I wanted to follow someone who was very knowledgeable about the finance industry, I would pay maybe $1 or $5 a month, something like that. So I think these are some of the companies that I really like.
Yeah, I must admit, when I first saw Trade Hero, I was like, what? Will people actually pay, to follow someone else's stock trading history? So I guess so.
So yeah, we're going to go off tangent, right? But I read somewhere that there's this company in the US where it was a product meant for developers, right? And it was a free product, but they basically said that if you don't pay us, we'll change the fonts to Comic Sans.
Oh, yeah, I saw that too. I saw that last
week.
Yeah.
And developers, right? They're very anal and prideful about the kind of fonts and everything. Even designers, right? They use. So they kind of latched onto that mentality that people have pride in the kind of fonts they use for their products. So they would charge people just to change the font. So that I felt was a very, very interesting business model that I think a lot of companies should try and adopt. So yeah, sorry for that.
For Indonesia, I think in terms of, you asked about disruptive companies, right? I think most of the companies in Indonesia that's doing something with online payments are doing something disruptive, not necessarily innovative compared to, like Singapore, we have plenty of them, and also Silicon Valley. But of course, Indonesia has a different banking system and how people use credit cards, how debit cards. Most of them don't even have saving accounts. So I think companies that are on that specific sector are doing something disruptive, and some of them actually, most of them have different kind of target on or method on the way they do stuff. But some of them now know that this kind of model doesn't work for Indonesia, but it's very disruptive. It changes the power structure basically. But so. Again, it doesn't guarantee success. And there's also this one company that they haven't launched yet, but I know the founder quite well, and he showed me the prototype, and I think it's amazing. It's a dating site called setipe.com, SETIPE.com. And the founder is a former Rocket Internet and a brilliant guy. He works with psychologists, also dating experts and stuff like that. It's really cool.
Can I add one more?
Sure.
So one thing just now you said earlier also about kind of tailoring or rather understanding the user profiles of your target market. And one thing, one app from the Philippines that launched just 12 days ago is Duets. It's an app, iPhone app to basically have a karaoke conversation with someone else. So Willis and I could download the app, and there'll be, the lyrics there, the song is there, and he could sing to me. And then he records it, and then I sing back. So it's like a karaoke thing. But why it's interesting is because it comes in the Philippines, where there's a huge karaoke culture and music culture. So I thought that it was very interesting that entrepreneurs latch onto their native land and what their consumers like and figured it out there. So if it's successful there, hopefully they can import it elsewhere.
Actually, the same idea it first started in China.
Oh,
Changpa, yeah. It's a huge company. So talking about like Rocket Internet, the interesting company that everyone likes. So they are copying the model of like Amazon and bringing it to Southeast Asia. But at the same time, I don't know if you agree, like if people here agree that they're innovative, but they're definitely disruptive, right? So what do you think?
Especially in Indonesia, they're very disruptive because they kind of showed, at a certain level, they're doing a good stuff. So they actually hired the local talents, and it's basically a knowledge transfer. Now the local people know how to get things done, not necessarily in a very innovative way, but the culture is probably not suitable as well. But they know that this is business, and this is how you get things done, and just how to execute. And well, as you can see in Indonesia, they're doing quite well. They have some difficulties, but I think in general they disrupt the whole industry.
I think Rocket is doing something that no other company in Asia is doing. They're seriously growing their balls and trying to tackle very, very serious problems in Asia. So if you look at their recent $100 million funding, right? If before the funding, I think if anybody ever asked, could an Asian e-commerce company or Singapore-based e-commerce company raise that kind of level, I think the flat-out question would be the flat-out answer would be no. So I think one of the key things that they're providing is some sort of a market validation, and they're really getting the attention of Silicon Valley and Russian-based entrepreneurs. So the guys who bought over ICQ were in town for the last few days, and they're also looking seriously at e-commerce in this region. So I think the best contribution they have, other than what Rama added, right, which is to improve the skill force, jobs, is the fact that they're giving a lot of market validation to the very fast-growing industries. So which I think is very important for us now.
One of the recent things that Zalora, one of the Rocket Internet outfits, has just done was to work with 7-Eleven to enable consumers to pay at physical stores to buy the products online. Zalora is a fashion e-commerce outfit. So that's something that's interesting because they actually adapted their business practices again to the local markets.
Any questions from the floor?
My question is, I think we've been talking a lot about startup for a few years, 3 to 5 years. How sustainable are the startups? That means out of, let's say, 100 companies we start up, how many manage to survive, grow, sustainable? Because you talk a lot having 100 million funding, but how many have reached $500 million revenue, for example?
So in startups and VC, you always say out of 10 startups, 9 will die and 1 is already dying. With that statistic, in general, you apply it across, it's quite sobering when you look at reality. And so for the past, we've been tracking the scene for the last 8 to 9 years, and I've seen a lot of companies die or were left dormant and then they come back again, because depending on timing as well. In terms of companies reaching $500 million, for the smaller startups over the last few years that has risen, I haven't seen that. And when you talk about sustainability, that comes about in continuing generating cash and business model. And one thing that I find lacking here in this region still is that entrepreneurs are a bit, they are so enamored by the funding scene, especially in Singapore, whereby there's a lot of grants and incubators around now to fund companies that they think that just by getting a funding round from a VC or from incubator that they are making progress, which is possibly a milestone of progress, but it's not really, right? I think on that level, there's much more to be done in terms of just a mindset change. So I'm positive, I'm looking at it positively, which is that, yes, we've grown. Our general sophistication of the entrepreneurs have grown. They realize that, okay, you have to think global, you have to look a bit more at revenue funds rather than, investor funds to grow your company. So I'm hoping that within the next few years, there'll be people running companies that from day one, that they will look at generating profits. Because there's also two camps of startups. One is users first, money later. Think YouTube, think Silicon Valley style. The other, a bit more New York, East Coast of the US is, okay, how are you going to make money? I think two camps, and I think so far we are seeing both kinds of entrepreneurs in the region sprouting. A little bit more on the profit side from day one, which is good. So I'm looking to the future.
During the Echelon event, people spoke about low tech, and you mentioned about the karaoke example. So I was just wondering, would it make more sense if Asian entrepreneurs went back to their grassroots to be more disruptive rather than following successful Western business models and examples?
I think Asian investors, right, if you compare them with, the user adoption in the US, it works very differently than from Asia. So a lot of the top services today, right, were actually adopted primarily at like very large-scale events or very niche pockets of people. So Facebook was primarily adopted in the Ivy League areas. Twitter was primarily adopted in, I think even Foursquare was primarily adopted in one event, which was South by Southwest. We don't have stuff like that in Asia. There's the question that's been brought up, if Facebook was launched in Singapore, would it, assuming it was the same product and everything, would it get that kind of market traction? And the flat out answer was no, because it didn't have the college infrastructure, the frat house kind of mentality that they have in the US. So if I were to take a step back, right, and I would say, how can companies be a lot more disruptive in Asia? I think the fundamental problem with Asian entrepreneurs is that sometimes they start a bit too early. They want to jump onto the whole startup bandwagon a bit too early without really understanding what are the core problems in this region, where are areas where they can help, solve issues or tackle some of the problems. Because those are not so apparent in Asia, simply because of Asia's culture of not wanting to share that much information, especially, company-related information. So if I have to take my personal self, right, if I could fast forward a few years, I might have want to spend some time in a corporate environment for a few years or in a mid-sized company in a few years just to understand better how things work. But that doesn't make sense for the US, because I think it's a slightly more open environment there. The mentorship structure is a lot easier. You can very much more easier get access and information to bigger companies, unlike over here. So in that sense, right, I think startups here should look at core issues. So if you look at the startups that are actually disrupting the traditional industries, like I mentioned earlier, My Legal Biz in the Philippines disrupting legal, Bilk in Thailand disrupting construction, and I think there's another company, I just don't remember the name now, disrupting finance. Those experiences and disruptions, right, come from them having spent maybe 3 to 5 years within the industry in the first place, and then knowing how to use web technology to disrupt that industry.
One example to that also in the Philippines is there's this long-time journalist and counter-terrorism lady. She started Rappler. It's journalism, but it's crowdsourced journalism. So that has been doing pretty well in the Philippines. So there's a sentiment crowdsourcing from readers. So that's something that's also, again, back to their own, when you talk about grassroots, it's tackling something an industry that they know well, and again, in a market that they know well. So going back to grassroots, and it's not mere kind of looking at US and bring it here.
Questions?
Could you give us an insight about what the founders are like? Are they young people just getting out of college, or are they people who work for a certain amount of time who realize problems in the industry? But what are the founders like? What's the demographic of the founders?
So it used to be that they were, either in schools or just fresh out of school. But if we look at today, right, a lot of them have maybe on average about 3 to 5 years experience in an industry. quite a few of them are actually professionals within the industry. So it's typically a very skills-based industry. So with the My Legal Wiz guys, I think they had about 5 years experience as lawyers within the legal industry. And these are the small minority of the people, right, who have that itch, you know, within themselves to say that, hey, look, something can be done better within this industry, or there could be an opportunity to try things in a different way. And that seems to be the case for all the companies that I mentioned. So even for Thailand, in Build, the company that is disrupting the construction industry in Thailand, founder had about 7 years experience within the industry. But before he did this current company, he actually started another company before that, that was a bit less innovation driven, but more services driven. So he had, you know, the whole clientele base, he understood the business relationships that were involved. So for him, it was, by the time he did the current company, he was a lot more mature in how he could get the business accelerated. So I'm seeing, like, you know, 5 to 7, 3 to 5 years kind of experience that people have within the industries. And it's all more skills based.
Yeah, Indonesia is not that much different, yes. And, you know, although probably 75% of the founders are very, very young, fresh out of college with almost no experience, but the 25% of the, you know, the founders who's now probably like, it's maybe more like 10 years of experience in the industry. They work for companies like Microsoft, IBM, Dell for like 7, 8 years, and then they resign and start their own company. They tend to be more successful in Indonesia. So the more successful startups in Indonesia are led by these guys, more experienced, more mature. But maybe I could fairly say that the more creative, innovative startups are led by the younger ones, you know, the fresh grads.
Questions?
This is not really into the theme of the panel. This is my first time to Singapore, so I'm really not familiar with this region. But I think Southeast Asian countries are really divided into the small sub-countries, and each country has its different language and its different culture. So that reminds me of the European countries. That is also divided into the different countries, and each has each language and culture. So how do you think such a European market can be an example to learn how to address such a fragmented market in the Southeast Asian countries?
Good question.
Can I summarize? So how can European
countries are also
similarly fragmented, right?
Yeah, fragmented and divided into lots of countries.
Yeah.
So even though we see the South Asian countries, it's not a whole country, right? So divided into lots of different countries. So and Singapore is really effective in terms of the headquarters for financial activities, but their market itself is really limited. So founders and entrepreneurs decided to business here, but so they had to expand their business into the other countries. But all the countries are different in terms of language and the cultures and the logistics. So my question is, how do you care for such a difference?
One thing that I think Europe has an advantage over Asia regarding the different languages is, at least for the German-speaking population, it cuts across a few different countries, right? You have Austria, Germany, parts of Switzerland. Here, what we have is even a more salient problem, which is many more languages, right? So for here, yes, for companies wanting to grow regionally, it's much tougher. You really have to have localized, localization and local partners. And perhaps Rama can talk a little bit more about going to Indonesia. But in Indonesia, you have to have everything in Bahasa Indonesia. So.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing probably like countries like Vietnam and Thailand who has their own language. Indonesia itself, we have thousands of dialects and languages as well. So I think localization is the key. And although the general, like people across Indonesia, they have similarities in terms of cultural. There's a acceptable generalization, set of things that you're able to do ethically in Indonesia, but you don't need to be too deep into localization. Just like support like a few, actually just support Bahasa Indonesia, and you're good to go. And I think probably same with Japan, a market like Japan, where you just partner with a local entity and just do business from there.
This question comes right now. I understand there. What sort of the service or products can be the how should I say, common products can be penetrated into the such different countries in Southeast Asian countries?
So I was actually going to answer the first question, but the second question also has some relation. If you look at the Skype case study in the Nordic region, so they had it in Stanford, and I wish I had paid more attention back then. Property Guru, which is the Singapore-based company in the property listings firm, essentially built out that exact same strategy for growing around this region. And I think that will be the major strategy that a lot of e-commerce companies or fundamental companies will adopt, which is the consolidation model. So you have to find companies, right, that are already your number one or number two within the region, in the local country, acquire them or take a majority stake, let them run for the first couple of years, and then rebrand them. So they did that with DD Property in Thailand. I think they did that with another Malaysian entity, and now also with the Indonesian entity. And their funding all came from the European side, because they could understand the influx of expats from that side and the fragmentation of their markets. So it just made sense for them to raise money here, acquire all the various assets around the region, and then do an IPO later on. So I think the property listing side, for example, in that case, would be very good for you to study for a strategy like this.
One thing about Asia, so we have to recognize that there are actually two Asias, urban and rural Asia. So targeting the two different kind of markets is something that has to be done. So if you're looking, so I think if I want to look at entrepreneurs and what kind of products or services they're trying to target, you should look at within, again, rural Asia or urban Asia, and what kind of consumer cuts across. One kind of market could be babies, for example. Everyone has babies, perhaps.
I would like to expand on the topic that the gentleman there raised about the playing copycat against the US. Europe might be especially the better target to look at, not only because of the fragmentation, but also because of the dynamics of the countries there. So, for example, if the business is very successful in an environment where you have, let's say, 50 million households with a combined income more than $100,000 per year, well, it clearly works in US, but it will be quite hard to get it working even in Europe, but especially here. At the same time, in Europe, besides the language barrier, there are countries which are actually quite poor as well. And if you go to Greece, for example, it's going to be very hard to get anything fly there. So if you are able to succeed in that, those kind of business models are probably very good fit into the fragmented world here as well. These are just my views. I don't know anything about Asia, but in a sense it sounds to me very odd to take a look at the US and try to copy something which probably doesn't have any of the key success factors, except if the model is really something of a very universal nature. How do you feel? Am I off target here?
I agree with that, actually, and I actually mentored at a Polish incubator. So I've done it for like two cohorts for the last 2 years. And it's interesting because when I visit Poland and I look at the Polish startups, they are also very, very local. So it's interesting whereby I look at what's happening in Asia. The problem is, again, whatever your local market, you need to try to break free. And I also see similar problems faced by entrepreneurs in Europe. And you're right, we should be looking a little bit more, in my opinion, we should be looking a little bit more to Europe, the successful companies, and see what we can learn from them. But at the same time, I think it's also important to look at where they have failed, right? Because there's always there's such a thing as survivorship bias. So if you look at what the successful companies have done, is on one hand is useful, but at the same time it's also quite useless. So we should be looking more, you're right, we shouldn't be talking more about the US. But I guess language, again, some of the information is quite inaccessible to us. To speak mostly English, I think. Thank you for that. Europe, yeah.
Okay, maybe I can jump in. It's so interesting, so I have to jump in as a moderator. So I think there's two things I want to add. One thing is I think we can learn something from Fruit Ninja. So when I interview the CMO, what they say is that everyone, everyone played Fruit Ninja, right? The one that's like, that one? No? Cutting the fruits? Come on, everyone played Fruit Ninjas, right? Okay, so like Fruit Ninja is like, yeah, because no one is responding, it's kind of sad. So Fruit Ninja is really successful, even in China, like I think 200 million downloads, mainly because, there's no language involved, it's all pictures, and it's like really intuitive. So it's like one way to cut through the language barrier. And the second thing that I want to add is that I think Asia can learn from Europe, agree? Actually, Asia can learn from anyone. I mean, even Europe can learn from anywhere, right? Same for the US. But I think more and more companies are looking at China. And I don't know, like when I talk to like William from Tokopedia, his model, he didn't learn anything from eBay. Basically, Tokopedia is a C2C marketplace. It's an e-commerce site. So where he learns that, he learns it from Taobao, which is the largest C2C marketplace in China. So same thing for like MiG-33. When they try to reinvent their social platform, they look at Weibo, which is like the Twitter, a better version of Twitter in China. So what I'm trying to say is that Southeast Asian companies are starting to look at China because Asian being Asian, the culture is still somewhat similar. That's all I want to add.
I just want to know is that in the world of, by the way, how did I miss that you're a moderator? Okay, I already introduced you as a moderator instead of Willis. Sorry about that. Please. But how do you see the crowdfunding here in Asia? We have this great example today. We showed with Brandon Go from Pirate 3D that is doing a Kickstarter, Asia's largest crowdfunding campaign. Still is not ending, but in the 600,000 mark. How do you see this crowdfunding evolve here in Asia? Rama?
From Indonesian side, I think last year we have 4 or 5 crowdfunding startups to launch in Indonesia, and just only a couple of months after launch, they all got funding from local and also some Singaporean investors. So I think crowdfunding is definitely the hot keyword for this year. And although some of the people outside the industry still kind of struggling on getting a grasp of, hey, what's crowdsourcing and what's crowdfunding and how do I benefit from there and why would I want all these people to to join and give me my own logo and stuff like that. But I think it's definitely picking up very, very well, especially in Indonesia.
I think with them, right, it was nothing about them being Asian, but the fact that they were really latching on a really hot thing now, 3D printing, and they were solving a real problem. Because there wasn't really a solution like that around that was simple to use with an easy to use interface. And I mean, we're talking about disruptive technology, right? But none of us actually really mentioned them earlier. So they would be one that, I would say is really disrupting the industry because they're solving the real problem. They're providing stuff that no other company has provided. But coming back to crowdfunding, right? I think Asian entrepreneurs have always lied back on the idea that, okay, the best way to raise money at the initial stages is friends and family first. Usually typically from the father's business or what. And then after that, you go to private investors. In Singapore's case, it's obviously government grants. But crowdfunding just gives out that new avenue. And the beauty of crowdfunding is that you're going to be judged by typically consumers who are going to judge your product, judge your presentation. So that adds a new challenge to them. But I think the nice thing about crowdfunding is that it's going to completely change how people think about building companies. So now they know that, shit, I have to do a really good job because my product can be out there, my pitch is going to be out there, and if I don't raise the money, it's going to look really bad for me. So they're going to make every effort to make themselves, way better than everyone else. And I think that might elevate the quality of products and companies that come out of Asia.
Crowdfunding is also fantastic because it's a way to get customers even before launching. So I fully support the crowdfunding movement. And later I'm moderating a panel on crowdfunding. Yan Lu, one of the panelists, is there as well. It's at 4 p.m. Yeah.
Looking forward. Willis?
Mohan took my line. Yeah. So I think
you can copy.
Yeah, I'm copying. Yeah, but I'm trying to localize. Yeah, so I think it's good because it really helps the entrepreneur to really set the direction of the product and really think about how not just to build a very, very good product, but how to pitch the product in a very good way, attractive way to attract a lot of different investors, crowdfunders. Yeah, so I think it's good.
Great. well, thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Really sweet. Congratulations on your last event last month. Mohan, congratulations on your Echelon event. And thank you all for supporting our event. Really, really appreciate that. And as a token of appreciation, I got Gwen, is a little gift for you. We named it, so got to make sure it's the right one. Thank you.
I think more importantly, thank you for inviting us and supporting us, small boys and girls. You know, I think it's I think for companies like us, right? Because of the fact that we are not as big as the big boys, because of the fact that we are generally younger than most other entrepreneurs, getting the support to do what we do can be fairly challenging, both from the government side as well as from the startups. You know, if you're a startup, right, your natural thing would be, let's go to TechCrunch or the Next Web or one of the bigger guys. And it's very rare to have them come to us or let us do an interview with them. So, I mean, we should thank you instead for giving us the support and the encouragement to continue what we do.
Thank you for having me here in Singapore. Thank you, Singapore, as well. Thank you.